Good morning, everyone. This is our series 2, which is the fall series of helping people who are authors get better and people who want to be authors just take the right path to get there, so you don't make some of the stumbles that we had. Our series in the summer was all about the inspiration. Every author has an inspiration as to why they write the book. And I think once you learn the inspiration, the book is more meaningful to you as you read it, and that's the whole idea. But then once we get you inspired, we want to also share our process. So every week we have a different topic category and different authors to share what their process was. And probably the number one question we all have as we journey into this author world is, should I self-publish or should I hold out and try to find a publisher where there are royalties, where the other one you make the money off the book you sell? Anyway, we're going to explain all that. I want to start out with Jacqueline, and we have Jacqueline Wales here, and she has self-published her books, and it has been quite a journey, but it's been successful. So Jacqueline, if you don't mind, share your journey for a few minutes, and then we're going to move over to Dale Walters, and he's going to share the traditional publishing world and what that's all about and how that works and what his journey was there. Once this sharing is done, we're going to open it up to all of you and let you ask questions and just go back and forth with the panelists and make sure that when this comes to a conclusion at the end of the hour, you've got some valuable tips and valuable information to move forward with in your book writing journey. One person I have asked to attend is Gwen. And Gwen Nichols is the person we hire, not the person who's necessarily author, but although she's done a lot of publishing of her works. But we hire people like Gwen to help our editing, our proofreading be what it should be. And so I also want her to offer some input later in the program. That being said, Jacqueline, you're on.
All right. So I'm the author of 3 books. The first one I wrote was called When the Crow Sings. It's a semi-autobiographical novel, and it took me over 12 years to write. In the beginning with that book, it's a story of family history. It was not an easy book to write, and for some people, not an easy book to read either. And what I discovered was that there was a literary agent who was interested in the book, but she couldn't get a publisher to take it. It's a pretty dark story based on family history, and I could not get anybody to pick it up. So after several months of waiting around, wishing and hoping, I decided, the hell with it, I am going to go and choose a vanity publisher. So I chose iUniverse to publish my book. But they did such a terrible job of it in terms of the editing and catching spelling mistakes and other aspects of it, that after it had actually been published by iUniverse, I decided to withdraw it and go to a marketing person that I had been, a book marketing person I'd been introduced to. And from there, we started from scratch. New book cover, new layout, copy editing, proofreading, so on and so forth. The entire run, just as if it were a traditional publishing company. We printed the books out in Canada, and they were put in a book depository, and Borders had it for about 3 months. And then, of course, it was, taken off the shelves. The biggest problem that I had with that was I didn't really understand the distribution piece. And I think that's a critical piece in terms of when you're self-publishing. The second book that I published was The Fearless Factor. And The Fearless Factor, basically, I went back to the same person and I said, okay, so I'm doing this self-help personal development book, and I need help to put this all together. So I hired these experts to make sure that the writing was clear and strong, and that the book itself, and I've felt this way about all my books, you would look at it and know that don't recognize it as a self-published book, because frankly, it's important. It's imagery, and it's all about your credibility. So I put some time and effort, and there was a lot of resources went into doing this process as well. The third book I created was The Fearless Factor at Work. That came out last year. And again, the same thing. I hired experts to make sure the copy editing, the layout, and proofreading was all done well as the book cover design and so forth. And of course, all these books are available on Amazon. But the biggest challenge that is there for all of these books, and you learn as you go along, I could have done it better back then and didn't, but there it is that you really do need to work out a whole marketing campaign for your book. If you don't do that adequately, your book will languish. You need endorsements, you need reviews, and I got quite a bit of that just by asking. And I got some really prominent people to say yes to looking at the book. So that was really gratifying in a lot of ways. But the self-publishing route, again, the speed at which you can do things is important, because what I found was with the publishing world, you could wait a while. You can wait a while to find the right agent, you can wait a while to find the right publisher, and you can wait a while to get it out into the world. And of course, if you're an unknown person like I was at the time, and you don't have a vibrant platform, a lot of literary agents aren't interested in talking to you. So there's a real issue with that as well. So for me, it made it obvious. And yes, it was an investment, because here's the thing about books, they're not there to make you money. They're there to increase your credibility, your authority, and taking ownership of your expertise in the world. And so that's kind of how I look at it in terms of, all the time and money and forethought that goes into it. But again, with each book I'm learning, there's other things you can do. So next book I'm going to be doing, which is number 4, is called Fearless Women Leading the Way. And I'm starting by doing a whole bunch of interviews with people. And then I will start writing next year. But I don't expect that book to be finished until at least the fall. But one thing I'm really clear about at this point, and I've had some input on this, is setting up your book launch and making sure that there's enough people who understand that it exists, and getting people to buy it and getting people to review it and so forth. So that's my background story on self-publishing, and I'm happy to take some questions afterwards. Thanks, Gloria.
Jacqueline's expertise comes to us because she's the author of 3 books, which she identified: The Fearless Factor and The Fearless Factor at Work. So if you have a chance to get those books, you'll learn a little bit more about her process. Her books, by the way, are guides to acquiring the skills toward greater self-awareness, effective communication, and better decision-making to enhance your career and life. So they're very valuable for us from every perspective. So I kind of wanted to share the background after they share their journey.
Thank you.
To kind of give a little bit more support there. Okay, and then there's the other world. There's the publishing world. And before I move on to that part, Dale's part, I am also self-published. And my story, just a little bit before I go to Dale, is I did have a literary agent. We did have a publisher, I think it was Bantam, that was interested in my books. But when I found out, and my books were to be a companion to my training module, so there was an urgency for them. And when I found out that Bantam said it could take up to 18 months to put the book out there, I thought, no, I can't wait that long. And then I learned that I wouldn't have any control over the cover. I want control over the cover. And then I learned that I wanted to have any quote in my book highlighted or to stand out. Well, that's called page styling, and that's their decision. I don't know if all publishers today are that rigid anymore, but back at that time, and certainly Dale might be able to share that with us, but I decided not to let them have that control. Also, as a professional speaker, I needed to have access to my works, and I needed to put it in different places as I moved forward. And I didn't want a publishing company to restrict me in any way. So that was my experience back when I put my books out there. Now I'd like to move over to Dale, because he's all about that world, the publishing world. His have been published by a traditional publisher. And then when he's done, we'll share his background. Dale.
Thank you. So yeah, obviously with a different route, but a little background is that I'm financial professional. So we're in business full time, working 50, 60 hours already, and didn't really have time to do all these other things that would be required to do it right. So that was a big part of the reason we chose a publisher. And my business partner had already published a book and already been with a publisher. So it just made sense to continue. But even though it wasn't my particular journey, to kind of back up, Bob, my business partner, he actually hired a professional that kind of matched him with the best publisher. There's obviously all kinds of publishers that have all kinds of different specialties, looking for different kinds of books and all those kind of things. So we went through that whole process. So we did that on our own. And then we came up with the publisher called Self Counsel Press. It's out of Canada, out of the Vancouver area. Because we were, we're not English majors, we're not, we just don't have a lot of time, and it's certainly not our thing, be writing books. But we had specialized knowledge. Our knowledge was Canada, US tax. And it's very, at the time, we were the only people in the world that had that expertise. So we wanted to share that expertise. And so anyway, that was kind of why we got it out there. And we were looking for, we didn't want the financial risk because we were kind of completely new to this. Do you do it in paperback? Do you do it in hardcover? How many volumes or how many editions, or not editions, but how many runs, how many actual literal books in the run? And then all the art stuff, like they talked about, the book cover and all the page layout and all that kind of stuff. That wasn't our expertise. We didn't know, we didn't want to deal with it. We didn't have time to deal with it. So all those reasons why we went into a publisher. But one of the things that Jacqueline ran into the issue is one of the good things I think they offer is, a third-party opinion of the value of what you're writing. And some people just want to write to say they have a, some idea or something they want to share, and they don't really care what it sells. They just want to get it down in a book form, and that's their objective. That's fine. But if they actually want it to sell, having a third-party opinion of what you're trying to write would be a good idea. And of course, a publisher offers that. They're in the business, especially if you have a publisher that's in your niche, so they see books like this all the time. They have a pretty good sense of whether the book would be, a viable book. Of course, they have built-in editors. They have deadlines. Matter of fact, I just had a lunch conversation yesterday with another author, and I was telling him that, if there wasn't for the fact there was deadlines, I probably never would have written any books, let alone 3 of them, because, I got stuff to do. I don't have time to, be writing books unless I'm forced to, and have deadlines, because, you always put it up, well, today this thing is more important than writing. And there's always something come up in the day that's always more important than writing. But with deadlines, I was able to get that done. Of course, they do all the art and layout, which we already talked about. And they also do virtually all the bookkeeping. So, they collect all the revenues and, all the returns that the bookstores send back to you. And, basically just send you an overall record plus your royalty check, and that's it. You don't have a whole lot of work on that end either. Of course, some of the cons are, as was already mentioned, is that the royalties are a fraction. My royalties range from 50 cents to $1, depending on whether it was an ebook or hardcover. Well, I'll call it hardcover in generic. Whether it was sold in the US or whether it was sold in Canada. So, you're not making, mine were best sellers, and they're still only made in total. This has been like 8 or 9 years. Total revenue is like $6,000. So you don't do it for the money. Of course, what we had, because they're technical books, tax books, they get obsolete fairly quickly, because they're always changing the laws. Everything's always changing, and to keep it updated, we would want to change, update, version 2, edition 3, whatever. And of course, the publisher had control over that. If they had still significant inventory, they didn't want you to write a second edition, because that means the first edition wouldn't sell, and they'd be stuck with all this inventory. So they have control over that kind of thing too. And it's a little bit frustrating because, by year 3, what we wrote previously, of course, remember, could be obsolete by the time it actually goes to publish. but certainly it's obsolete by the time year 3 rolls around. And if the books haven't been sold, then we're selling obsolete information. And of course, as mentioned, they have the copyright. If we wanted to do something with it, we'd have to get permission. But hitting on something that came up about flexibility, I'm sure this varies from publisher to publisher, but we did have quite a bit of flexibility. I mean, sometimes we'd have to have some vigorous discussions about book covers or whatever. But they did have flexibility. I mean, one time they even came down to a bullet list, and the publisher wanted to put periods at the end of each thing, even though it wasn't a complete sentence. Little things like that you're bantering back and forth about. Anyway, all those kind of things. Oh, and sequence. One thing that we did have when we lost this discussion is order. So we had 3 books. 2 of them, one was taxation of Canadians in America, and the other was taxation of Americans in Canada. And we wanted to do taxations of Americans in Canada first. We thought it was, that's where most of the need is at, and blah, 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 blah. But they wanted to do it in the reverse. So we lost that battle. And of course, after the fact, they learned, well, I guess you were right, but it doesn't really help after the fact. But so they have control, they have a lot of control, obviously, and rightfully so. It's their money at risk. I have 0 money at risk. All I have at risk is time. So, they should have some control. I get that 100%. But you have to recognize that with that comes some frustrations.
Thank you, Dale. Well, I'd like to add to what Dale said is that Dale has owned and run many businesses over many years. So he certainly has the expertise there. He understands the needs and frustrations, the challenges of business owners. He has experienced the decisions to be made with regards to structure, compensation and benefits, pricing, marketing, etc. Ultimately, the successful transition of a business to the next leadership step. And certainly he's using his books as one of the models to use to take that journey. So I wanted to share that too.
Yeah, mine only made $6,000 in royalties. It made $600,000 in revenue from work that was gained.
He's a former wrestler too. That one's surprising. Okay, that's good. He has I'm reading his notes here. He has a 4th degree black belt in judo. For those of you who find that fascinating, I do. And 1st degree black belt in the Israeli self-defense system of, how do you say this?
Krav Maga. Krav Maga.
Krav Maga. Okay. So
and a 4-time world karate champion.
That is totally amazing. And of course, this book journey that we're doing with this series is not possible without our leader, Doug Bronke. And I'd like Doug to come on and just kind of share a little bit of what the Global Chamber is doing to help authors get better or advance, or somebody become an author. So are you there?
I am. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Great. If you don't mind, I'd like to ask just Dale a quick question. I wrote something down that wasn't obvious to me. You said that you had an experience or an expertise that nobody else had, so you had to write a book. So why did you have to write a book? I guess what you were thinking is that last comment that you made, that by writing about your expertise, I guess fully, or at least my own experience, actually I got to see a little bit of the early journey through what you were doing. It seems like your philosophy was, let's just lay it out there, and it's complicated enough, and there's so many different things that happen. It doesn't matter if we give them the secrets, because they won't be able to pull it together. Is that how you viewed it? That the value really wasn't the 6,000, it was clearly the 600,000.
Right, and of course I made up the 600,000. It could have been 6 million, it could have been whatever, but anyway. Yeah, so that was the philosophy, because it is very, very complicated. You can imagine, well, you know how complicated US tax is. Well, and then of course you have Canada tax, and then you add the third layer, cross-border, the treaties and all that kind of stuff. It's unimaginably complicated. So I think the problem that we were running into in our prospects and marketing is that, people thought it was easy, because they could have had a relatively easy situation when they were in Canada, and now they moved to the US. Their situation hasn't changed, other than now they live in the US. but because of that move, their complications have increased, tremendously. And to get that point across, so we wrote, the books, the layout, and here's all the issues. So they don't know what they don't know. So now we just told them what they don't know. It's amazing. We knew it happened, but it's always puts a smile on your face when they finally acknowledge, like, wow, that's a lot more complicated than we thought. We need to hire somebody.
That's awesome. So, and Gloria, sorry to step in front of the questioning, so I'll stand down. But your original question to me was, what in the heck are we doing here?
Yeah.
And one of the things that really impresses me about the Global Tribe, there's many things, by the way, but in general, the Global Tribe are, I think, more enlightened. Sorry, getting a call. Are generally more enlightened, more understanding. Look at Dale and his background. It's more than actually just wrestling, right? It's a worldview of understanding how people get along, and I'm reading too much into it, but I've always been so impressed with Dale in his way he interacts with people and the way he understands that the kind of the wrestling match between minds, if you will. And that's a higher level conversation. And a thinking process. And so the Global Tribe think higher, I think, and better, and they write more books. I think if you just take any chamber of commerce and you'd say, well, what percentage of these folks have written a book? It's lower percentage for them than the Global Chamber, because our people want to give out their information, they want to share, and maybe most importantly, they want to have an impact. They're typically not the people, although there's nothing wrong with this, of having like a great career and then retiring and disappearing for the rest of their life. I think they tend to be more, look, I've got all this information and I can help people. I want to help people, and so I think I'm wrapping a lot of different things all up into one thing, but I just love the fact that so many of our members are giving back, sharing information, writing books as one mechanism to do that, and continuing to have an impact in the world. So I celebrate what you're all doing. I love the fact that we started with kind of more general, like specific cases, like let's talk about our intercultural books, which were amazing, those first 8 ones. And now we're getting into the practical, what publish or self-publish, which is best. And we're now giving a roadmap to people. A new member joined yesterday. He took a company from 200 million to over 500 million just in the last few years, and he wants to write a book. And so when I heard that, I said, oh, interesting. And he wants to be a speaker around a certain area. It's like, well, I think there's some events you need to be coming to. And so that conversation happened on Friday and he joined on Monday. And I think a key part of it was, getting connected to people like that are here on the stage. So Gloria, thank you for putting this together. Sorry to talk so long, but just admire the heck out of all of you. Thank you.
Thank you. I think that the journey I want to take this next conversation, but before I do, I'm going to ask anyone out there participating in this Zoom, if you have a question based on what you've already heard for any of the panelists. So let's do that first, and then I'll give you another topic to talk about. Anyone have a question?
I'm curious about how you are handling your marketing, because that is the author's responsibility these days. So I'm wondering how you're handling the marketing and distribution part of that.
And that question goes to who?
All of them.
Okay. Okay, Dale, maybe we can start with you and then go to Jacqueline.
Sure. Well, I think part of when you go to a publisher, take it back to the beginning, is that whether they accept you or not is whether you have the connections and a marketing plan and able to market the book. Again, they taking all this risk and have this inventory, they need to be able to move it. And of course, the large part of that responsibility is you as the author. So obviously we had that. We have, websites designed, microsites that tied in with our main website. We did speaking tours. We did all kinds of things. So the answer is, yeah, we have the entire plan laid out for all these books. And that's also part of the reason they took us and we're our publisher. Did you want more specifics of exactly, or just a general?
Yeah, that's exactly what I wondered.
And
Lori,
Jacqueline?
Lori and Jacqueline, you want to say? We have a lot of other authors. We could spend all day on that topic, but if you want to just give me a few lines.
Yeah, marketing is a complicated thing. I mean, there's no question that you need to have a plan on what you're doing with it. My first Fearless Factor book, I spent a lot of time out there speaking to organizations and distributing my book through these events that I spoke at. I also use my online networks to launch the book as well and make sure that it was getting in front of people, as well as my mailing list. I'm in a different kind of category from where Dale is, because I'm really all about leadership. So a lot of my book sales do come out of any events or client work that I happen to be doing. So for instance, I'm doing an event in January and they don't have any money, but they said they would buy a whole bunch of books. So, you know, again, I'm not going to make a ton of money out of that either, you know, unless they buy from me directly, because if I'm spending, you know, if I'm buying the books myself on Amazon, and, you know, this is like more to the sales process piece, but if I'm buying my own books, it's like just over $4 a book to buy my own books. But then if I'm going to go out and I'm going to sell it for $15 to $20, there's where I'm going to be making my money on the books per se. But the marketing side of it is really about, you've got to have all your contacts, your networks and so forth all lined up, especially as a self-published author, in order to make a dent in it. But then after a while, it's going to settle back down into Netherland again, you know, because there's a ton of books. I mean, I'm asked almost weekly to help with book launches from my networks. And there's only so much you can do with that. So that's a big piece right there.
Yeah, Jacqueline brings up a good point that it doesn't have to be all of one or the other. If you want to get more revenue out of your published book, you could buy the books and have your own marketing plan and sell them that way as well.
Mm-hmm.
In my experience, I probably did not dive into the marketing the way I should have or could have, because I was so watching the expenses as a self-publisher. And so I depended primarily, because I am a professional speaker, I did a lot of back of the room sales. And then I also would have my books as a part of my training module. So those are the two areas where I probably made the most of my sales. But I had a client of mine, it was just a workbook at the time, or a handbook to my modules. And my client at Lexus, I did about 5 years of work with them before the 2008 hit and things changed. There used to be University of Toyota, University of this, and I did a lot with the corporate universities. And they said, you know, Gloria, why don't you just publish these books, self-publish and just get them out there. There will be more credibility for your work in your training modules and your training programs if they're published works. So that's actually what the incentive was for me. So it's a little bit different direction from that point of view. I know we have other authors on here like Lainey, and you worked with a publisher on your book, correct? And you might have some insight here too.
Yes, on both of the books. And it was different experiences with each one. I'd say you can't count on your publisher to do much in the marketing, although we've been really fortunate that, and I wanted to add that there are lots of different ways to market. So one of the things with the Working with Americans book we did, thanks to the help from the publisher, was a webinar about working with Americans, and the Global Chamber promoted it on their calendar and were very supportive. But we also had the opportunity for my co-author, who's in London, to go to the Frankfurt Book Fair. And you would think that, I mean, that was a life goal for her, to go to the Frankfurt Book Fair and have a book to market. And fortunately, the publisher was willing to make that happen. And it was the biggest disappointment of ever. It just had no energy, no nothing. And we had this fantasy of go to the Frankfurt Book Fair and the world will come to find you and it'll be fabulous. However, COVID kind of interfered with all the opportunities we had for books to be picked up and translated around the world. So you just don't know. But I think the important thing is to be open to all kinds of opportunities. Jacqueline, yes, about selling in the back of the room, and you just never know. But I would say that when you go into a bookstore and you find your book on the shelf in a bookstore, it's pretty exciting. So I think what we'd all say is you have to be flexible and open to all ways to market.
Yeah, I apologize for that little disappearing act. My computer became unplugged all of a sudden. I had to quickly plug it
Oops.
back in. But at least it didn't take very long. But the good news is that next week, week 5, our topic is about marketing, the timing and the strategy. So we can take this to a way higher level of conversation next week. So usually we promote the next week program at the end, but this was top subject came up just now, and I thought, no, I'm going to mention it right now. So we're going to dive deeper into it at that time. One of the things I do want to offer and put out there for input from our panelists too is the editing process. And that's one of the reasons why I asked Gwen to join us, because she's the person we hired to help us with that part. In self-publishing, when I did my first manuscript, I actually had my own proofreader editor go through my work first, and to get it as clean as possible before I even sent it over to the publisher. Now, I used a publishing house called Sweetmark. So it's actually a publishing house, but it's a self-publishing house. So it's not like using an internet version of publishing. I didn't do that. I think there's some companies out there that are strictly on the internet, and you send them your manuscript and they just throw it out there. No, they put me through a huge, huge process to get it out there. But the editing and the proofreading was probably I was most disillusioned with, because it wasn't done as well as it could have been. I thought that once I sent it semi-clean, at least I thought it was. And I think sometimes, John, my editor, just got tired of reading my material. And I think when you have somebody who's reading your material a lot, they're not seeing the obvious anymore because they've read it so many times. So I will say that in defense of him right there. And I'm going to ask Gwen's comment on that in a little bit. And then I sent it to Weimar. And then when one of the first books that sold, I actually received an email that said, Gloria, on page such and such, you have ITS. It should be IT''S. I thought, oh my God, are people doing that? Are readers doing that to us? And I had a few more and said, and Gloria, in this one chapter, you made this comment in this paragraph, and then later in your book, I found it again. It's like a cut and paste, and I didn't realize that I put it in 2 different places because it actually fit in both places, and I didn't reword it, so it made more sense. And so, oh my gosh, be careful. Then it came time to create the ebook, and instead of having Wheatmark create my ebook for me, I hired an ebook builder. They are out there; they're great. This particular ebook builder had an English teacher background, so I figured that should work. And he found so many things that Wheatmark, and it went through John, and then it went through 2 phases of editing and proofreading with my self-publisher, publisher. And then an ebook builder found even more things. So I don't know what I could have done differently. I don't know, Jacqueline, what your experience is with it, because this is critical, that the editing process and catching grammar, phrases, or spelling, or punctuation, or any of that is really important to your credibility. And so I would like to throw that one out there, because I think that's the important part of this whole process. So I'll start with Jacqueline.
I definitely can speak to that. My books go through at least 6 or 7 iterations before I'm ready to send it over to copy editor, proofreader. And they're generally 2 different functions between copy editing and proofreading. And I found that no matter how many times you go over it, you'll still find stuff that could have been caught. And it doesn't matter how many eyeballs are on it, you're still going to find typos or something that doesn't quite make sense. But my first editor is always my husband. And he is incredibly patient with my writing. And of course, he'll go through it with a fine tooth comb and tell me that, it's grammatically incorrect, or it's got too many these or that's, or whatever the word might be that I'm using a lot of. So he helps me to really get this as strong as I can before I finally send it to a professional. And the last professional I worked with was wonderful, because she would actually put in comments about, is this what you really mean? Or do you think you could make this a little bit stronger? And these are the things that we need, because when we're close to our writing, we don't see it, you know, and especially when you're writing and rewriting. And of course, we know that writing is rewriting. You know, your first draft is usually the shitty draft where, you know, you're just kind of spewing your stuff on the paper, and then you kind of look at it afterwards and go, what were you thinking? But, you know, I think that iterative process is really, really important in the editing. And again, finding the right people to do the editing for you is really, really critical. And that comes through referrals a lot of the time. Talk to other authors who have you used that might be able to help out with this. And I think, you know, at the end of the day, you have a strong product. I mean, I'm proud of all of my books because I think they really were gone over and over and over until finally I could say, enough already, because there is a point at which you go,
Yeah.
it's good enough, let it go, because you can keep picking forever. And I'm sure every author on this call can relate to that. You finally have to just close the book, literally. Enough, you've done.
Yeah.
Put it
And
up.
Adele, I think you had something to say on that too.
No, I agree 100%.
Yeah.
One time we had of course, it was an editor of the publisher, but it was so bad, you know, because this is more of a technical book, but you'd have examples, or you'd have, you know, things. So in the text, it would say, see example 3. Then you go to example 3 and that's not the right example. Things like that, like, hello. So I actually insisted that they fire that editor and use one of the other editors, because, you know, that person was not paying attention at all. So I mean, yes, I mean, I would say as a whole that the publisher editors are, you know, not as thorough, because, you know, they do this all the time. They kind of get bored of it probably, but and, you know, after the third or fourth time, but you know, you still, as the author, you still have some say and say, no, enough of that, let's try somebody else.
Thank you. And now I'm going to put Gwen in the hot seat, because this is her background. She helps us with this issue, and maybe from both the self-publishing and the publishing perspective, give us some help here and offer some great guidance.
Okay, I'd love to. I loved this session. Thank you so much. I loved what you've said. I could just say amen to all those comments you made about your experiences. I've seen that, I've heard it. I'm currently working with Christine Pearson, a professor at Thunderbird, who is writing her 6th book. She always went traditional, and then she would end up with situations where they took a book out of print, or she didn't have the rights to something. And right now, she had a contract with Routledge, the academic publisher, and they were not willing to sell the book for less than $40. So she returned her advance and canceled the contract and went the self-publishing route. And she did it the way I suggested, of setting up her own company and going through Lightning Source, the printer, which is where most of these other services are going. Most of them are middlemen for Lightning Source. So she set up her own publishing company. She did all of that, and she's hired out the different pieces of the process. But she wanted that creative control. She has tenure. She's really advanced in her career, and the Dean of Thunderbird has her, you know, gave her his blessing that she can take this route. Someone who's seeking tenure might want that gatekeeper, traditional book publisher name, but that's all of these trade-offs that all of you have had to make. I've definitely seen those kinds of things. I want to offer a word of comfort for those typos. I can't read a New York published book without finding 3 typos in it. It's just, here's what happens. Our brains are designed to fill in anything that's missing. If we didn't, we would just be crippled all the time about all the missing information in the world. All the gaps would drive us crazy. And so we are designed to overlook any errors. And it's good for our relationships. If we were this nitpicky with each other about every little slip of grammar, it just wouldn't work. So our brains are helping us by being so inaccurate. Proofreading is actually a really difficult skill to learn, because you have to override normal brain function. And the way you do it is really precise. When I worked my way through college working on a peer-reviewed academic journal, and our process was source checking came first. Every detail on the sources came first, and sometimes the book sometimes an article would get rejected. It was tentatively accepted. We would check the sources. We'd find out they were distorting their sources, and it was out. So source checking came first, then polishing the manuscript. And when we got down to the final detail, we had a perfectly edited manuscript, and then we had the layout. And two of us would sit knee to knee, and one would read aloud. And we would read from last sentence to first. And we would have our little abbreviations. So we would say things like cap Washington, cap D point, cap C point, and we would go on. So we would start with the last sentence, and we would work our way back through the manuscript, reading it aloud with two people. That's how much it takes to override the normal human brain. That's especially the most common error is a missing word. Just that happens all of the time. And it happens. And the other thing is we store our vocabulary phonetically. So I will go back, and in my handwritten journal, I will confuse me and B. That's my most common error. I'll have a me or a B because they're stored phonetically. They're me, B. They're the same part of the mouth. And they make no logical sense. They're just phonetic. That's my handwritten error that's most common, is I'm scribbling away. So to proofread, you have to totally override normal human brain function. And so that's why I really recommend getting the rounds of developmental editing and the copy editing out of the way so you can do true proofreading. What happens really often is those get collapsed. I'm sometimes in the situation where I'm still copy editing at the same time I'm proofreading. So I am still reading from front to back, and I'm still reading to make sure it's making logical sense. And I'm still looking at the sentences to make sure everything's working. I'm not just looking one sentence from the back to the front. So that is just my tip for you. It's a time-consuming process.
Can you define your terms? Copy editing. Go ahead.
Okay.
Define
Well,
those.
development. It sounds like Jacqueline, you got a little bit of developmental editing when they said, "Hey, is this what you meant? Do you want to do this?" Developmental editing is the first stage. It can start with just the idea. You're going back and forth with drafts. You're thinking about. At this point, you have a working title. You have a working outline. You're drafting, but you're still flexible. And you're totally open to someone almost acting as a co-author, just really challenging you, pushing you, saying, what about this? Bringing up what they think the reader's questions might be, and really helping you with the content. So that's developmental editing. Copy editing gets down to the making sure all the sentences, and by the way, when you're developmental editing, you're doing all this other stuff. If you catch a typo, you fix it, but you're not focused on, I am going to catch every typo in this draft. Every time we open an editable manuscript, a new error is going to sneak in. It's just every time somebody touches it, and every time a new reader gives ideas, and every time a little revision is made and we move this part of the sentence over here, there's a chance we're going to leave a word out. Oh, it's just, so at the developmental stage, you aren't ignoring typos. If you see them, you catch them, but you're not focused on that. You're focused on the big picture, the structure. And then copy editing gets down to kind of paragraph sentence level. It does get down to the mechanics. It's trying to get everything in place. And then proofreading is specifically looking only at mechanics, so that you could actually read the manuscript backwards and say, that sentence right, that sentence is right, that sentence is right. So I have a tip for you. You know, I think most of the errors in a book, most of the difficulties people have happen at the very beginning. They don't really know who they're talking to and why they're writing this book. That's where a book can fall apart. Or they have so much expertise piled up, they want to put it all in when maybe really it should be 6 books. So my encouragement is to really work on targeting the mission in general, then build your knowledge base. So you're not worried about, is it going in this book or not in this book? It doesn't matter. You're just writing everything you know. Some of it's going to go in this book. Some of it's going to end up on your blog or your LinkedIn articles or wherever you want to use it. Nothing you write is going to be wasted, whether it goes in this book or in some other form. So you just think about it as a knowledge base. And then third step is build that specific book. And then fourth step is your marketing. I've created a couple of infographics I can share with you to do that. And I've also I have a checklist of that whole process of how to get the book finessed at the very end. I'll put those in the chat. I can do that, can't I? I can add
I hope so.
add files.
Okay, I think I'm gonna, thank you,
One's
Gwen.
about the-
That was powerful. That was powerful. Dwayne, do you have anything you'd like to add based on your self-publishing experience?
Well, I really just appreciated what Gwen was saying, and my process is just a quick outline is, I'm building a body of knowledge around a set of skills that are a part of a set of online courses where you take the courses. So it's a little bit of Dale stuff in terms of a body of knowledge. But I actually write a book, and I go through a pretty rigorous process. And my book number 9, for example, is still in draft form. And I actually print it up in a form like this after I've spent a lot of time with it. And then I send it out to about 50 of my friends who kind of understand the area. So that helps me with this knowledge editing that Gwen was talking about. And so they say, this is not clear, that's not clear. And of course, before I send it to them and before I print it, I use a tool called Grammarly. Grammarly is a magnificent tool for cleaning up a lot of the stuff. It doesn't do everything, but it does a terrific job of making it easier. And then in my group of 50, I have about 10 folks who are marvelously retentive. And my biggest expense, I always say, is paying for their red pens. And so anyway, that's kind of the process. And then of course we do self-publish because we're, for any number of reasons, but we're not depending on anyone to market the book except us through our processes and for our purposes. And down the road, we know that kind of what makes the difference for a book is if you get 2 or 3 big influencers in your particular category, your book will sell because the influencers talk about it. So, and that's almost a mystical, magical process. So you can't depend on it, but.
Thank you.
One thing that made me think, if you're writing more technical stuff, I always use my wife as an example, the layman, because you get all the jargon in there. If you give it to other professionals, they'll just, like Gwen was talking about, their brains are just used to that jargon, not know as jargon.
Yeah.
So I give it to somebody that's not in the business to see if they understand, what it is I'm saying.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm going to jump in here with the whole developmental idea that Gwen and Dwayne just talked about, which is sharing it with other people and getting their input is really, really critical. Because they do catch the inconsistencies, they do catch the places where it's not clear. And I think that's a really important part of again, the iterative process of creating a book in the first place. But the developmental piece, I think, is really takes the longest in fact. It's like you think you've covered all the bases and then somebody points out that this is about as clear as mud. So, you got to go back and rework it again. And
Can't have thin skin.
Well,
you got to be happy with, got to be okay with the rejection piece, like, it doesn't work. Okay, I've got to figure that one out. But I think it's a really critical step along the way in creating any book, whether it's with a publisher or otherwise, but certainly when you're on your own doing this, it can be even more complicated. But find there are good people. You mentioned Grammarly, Dwayne, and I know of it, and I think it is a wonderful app. There's lots of people use it. There's another company out there called Reedsy, REEDSY.com. And they have editors and designers and all kinds of ways in which you can learn about book marketing and where we go from there. And that's probably a conversation for next week, but I thought I would mention it in this moment.
Thank you.
We're getting down to the wire here a little bit, and I want to make sure that everyone who is listening has a chance to ask their question. So we have 2 or 3 other people here who have not had made any comment. Do you have any questions for any of our panelists, or just a question in general?
I did get that shared. Sorry, I forgot to turn off my microphone. You had to hear me
Okay.
clicking around. This
I think
chat
Omar
required
just
to put it into Google Drive, so you can download it from the chat.
Okay, I think Omar just went live, so you have a question.
Yes, just a quick question. I heard about the conversation here. So I'm more of a marketing person who has a little bit of experience on doing business marketings. But one of the reasons I see that the books are not, so attracted with the customers in the market is that it doesn't have so much of content, you know. So the only thing that could be considered as a content from the book is the cover. So right now, these days, the social media is like way much more, you know, connecting people everywhere, students, professors, everyone. So youths, if we see like 18 to 25, as Dale says, you know, they have deadlines. They are not so much attracted to the books. So they, you know, scroll down on up social media, you know, and they see the contents that they're live, you know. For example, they see the videos, they see the businesses and the video that's, you know, advertised. So what my question is, have you ever considered your book to be framed inside a small video and it's in the social media, so that everyone, when scrolling up and down, they go and the video, you know, pops up and says, you know, this book is Fearless Factor and it has a content which is, you know, pool of knowledge, 12 years of experience or 12 years of hard working, you know. So I think that will attract lots of people, because me as a consumer, I only go to the bookstores to see which books are there available, so that I can grab one, read the cover and maybe a little bit of contents inside. But from my perspective, if we have the book and it's framed inside the video and it's put in social media like Facebook, Instagram, I think it will attract more of consumers. So the question is, have you ever considered putting the book inside the frame of the video so that it will go to social media and attract some customers?
I'll answer that question. I have used videos, and I have used, you know, me talking about the contents of the book and showing the book images. But I'm not sure that if you're really talking about showing what's inside the book in the video, which strikes me as being
just a little bit of like what this book is about, like a small pitch about the book.
Yeah, I mean, you do that in your you know, introductory videos, or, you know, whatever learning videos that you're creating. And I've done a few of those in the past. And because I work with a video guy, he edits it and puts in imagery and so forth. So it's pretty clear in social media or on social media who I am and what it is that I do. And I think that's really the main driver for the videos. And of course, it's about the connection with the audience in a more personal way. Because one of the things I'm doing right now, for instance, is I'm interviewing all these women for my next book. But I realize that not everybody reads a book, but they will watch a 15-minute video. So I'm taking these recorded interviews and I'm turning them into a series of videos that I ask the same questions of every participant, so that there's a double use of this content and information, which I think is really important today. Video is really, really important. And I think it's going to be more and more so as we go forward.
And probably in the form of a trailer too. And I was thinking trailers as I was listening.
Yeah, I did a trailer for When the Crow Sings. Again, it was professionally done, and it was quite impactful. You know, had music and all other kinds of stuff on it. So there's lots of ways in which you can take your book to market and make it more visible. So I thank you for the question, Omar.
Yeah, that's great. Is anyone else who has not asked a question that's on the Zoom call have a question for anyone?
But I can respond to that last question a little bit.
Okay.
So my next book, I was considering, rather than putting everything into one book, breaking up each chapter into separate ebooks. It might sell for $1.99 or $2.99 or whatever per chapter, so that if you only have a interest in one particular thing, you don't have to spend $20 per a book. You can spend $3 or $4 or $5 per a book for that chapter, for the information you need. That's one thing I'm considering doing for the next book.
One thing I wanted to say here before we come to a close, we have about 4 minutes left, is that when you do select a self-publisher, please realize that a lot of the cost is going to be a la carte. That was my biggest lesson. Whatever self-publishing house that you hire to produce your works, they're going to give you a fee and they're going to say, I can do it for this amount of money. But what they're not telling you is if you don't like the cover they come up with, you have to pay to have your own cover done. They're not telling you that if you want indexing in the back of the book, and mine are resource books, so written indexing was important to my books. That's going to be this cost. And then if you want page styling, something different to make a quote stand out, that's going to be this cost. I ended up spending double what I was quoted because I wanted, and I thought this was all included. That was my naiveness. But I had to pay extra. I didn't like the cover because it was silhouettes, and my books aren't about black and white silhouette kind of covers. And the indexing and the page styling, those things are so important to me that I ended up paying, like I said, double. So watch that expense. Know what you're paying for, know what it's going to be involved so you can budget appropriately. Otherwise, you're going to use your marketing money on the development of the book, and which is kind of what I did. The marketing money I put aside, I ended up paying on the books instead. So it was a huge lesson for me to learn when I went through that process. Anyone else have a comment before we close and announce next week again?
I just want to speak to what you were just saying, Gloria. I found that the money I spent on the first book and what I spent on the third book, vastly different, because I learned, that there's ways in which you can create a better resource piece for yourself. So again, to your point, be mindful of where you're putting your money when you're doing this, because there's lots of people who put their hand up and go, yeah, I can help you. And there's lots of organizations out there doing that, but you got to be really, really careful about what it is that you're getting into and what you're asking for.
Okay, and I see a hand up. Omar, you have something else? Your hand's up. Did you have another question? Before we go to Omar, one more thing I want to say about that is cost overall. They'll quote you for so many pages. Well, one of my books went 5 or 10 pages over, and it ended up costing about $5 more to have created, only because I didn't realize that extra 5 pages put me in a different page number category. So when they quote you from maybe 100 to 199 pages, say, for example. But if your book is 210, you're going to go into another cost category. And I didn't watch that either. And that was a lesson. So my last 2 books, they're very thick and they're very expensive to have made. I'm not making anything off them because they cost so much to produce because I went over the page limit, which I was, again, naiveness, learning mistake. I know we're coming to a close here, but before I open up to any other questions, I do want to make sure that you do come back next week and remind you that we are going to be talking about marketing as it relates to timing, as it relates to strategies. And our 2 amazing panelists are going to be Kathy Fyock, F-Y-L-O-C-K, if I'm saying her name correctly, I'm not sure. And Michael Seaver is somebody new that we came across whose background is, both their backgrounds are so amazing. I'm so proud, and I'm sure Doug is just as proud. So at this time, I kind of like to close by giving the baton back to Doug for his closing comment. And let's see if Doug is there.
Gloria, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Sorry, I happened to be caught in an elevator. So,
Okay, just for closing, if you wouldn't mind.
thank you for putting this together. Looking forward to the next conversation. I think next week's on marketing, that's the big one, right? That's a lot.
It's a big one. It's a big one.
A lot of things to learn from it. So I'm really looking forward to it. Back to you. Keep up the good work.
Thank you. And thank you, Gwen, for all the wisdom that you shared with us. I'm so glad you jumped on with us and I could reach out to you because you're the person we hire to get it right. And I'm definitely going to be looking into yours more. And again, we're coming to a close. I see we have Werner, we have Yvonne, we have Theory. I don't know if you have any questions. Me the last minute. Anything? Well, that being said, thank you so much for joining us. Have a great rest of the day and, start writing, create your outline, get going.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.